Hello students, how are you? In our last class we started to discuss about the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Okay, and our next topic, that is difference between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, is totally based on the discussion that we done in our that we did in our last class. Okay, so again let me repeat it, because these points are very important in our next topic, that is difference between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Okay, as the name indicating, prokaryotic, that means carry on means nucleus, and the prokaryotic, that means pro, it is used for the primitive or undeveloped or undefined. So we can say that those organisms which have primitive or undeveloped or undefined nucleus are called prokaryotic organisms, while eukaryotic, that means developed or defined nucleus. So we can say that those organisms which have those cells, because we are using the cell word here, so we can say that those cells which have developed or defined nucleus are called eukaryotic cells. If we want to expand the definition, then we can use the organelles also. In the prokaryotic cells, they do not have membrane bound cell organelles, while the eukaryotes have membrane bound cell organelles. So if we use these terms also in our definition, then we can say that those cells which have undeveloped or undefined nucleus and lack of membrane bound cell organelles are called prokaryotic cells. Okay, while those cells which have defined or developed nucleus and membrane bound cell organelles are present is called eukaryotic cells. Okay, one more thing that we discussed about the prokaryotic cells, that they have undefined nucleus which is called nucleoid, while in the absence of the membrane bound cell organelle, or we can say that organized cell organelles, their cellular functions is performed by the poorly developed cytoplasm. But in the case of the eukaryotes, they have defined or developed cell organelles, so their cellular function are performed by these organelles. Okay, and we also discuss about the examples of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. The virus, bacteria comes in the category of prokaryotic cells, while the human cells comes in the category of eukaryotic cells. Okay, this is important question that generally asked in exams, that is what is nucleoid. Now let's make a comparison table between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. There are lots of topics, there are lots of points that we discussed in this. We will use in the differentiate between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, like the size, like the nuclear region, like the cell organelles, like the chromosomes. So our topic, today's first topic is prokaryotic and versus eukaryotic cells. Okay, now the points in which we compare about these two, first is size, second is nuclear region and nucleus, third that is number of chromosomes, and fourth is our cell organelles. On the basis of these four, we compare between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Okay, if we compare the size of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, then prokaryotic cells are small. Generally they are small. We can use generally word here also. Generally they are small, while eukaryotic cells, they are generally large. If these are comparison between each other, compared to the eukaryotic these are small, and compared to the prokaryotic these are large. Okay, if we consider the size, then these are 1 to 10 millimicron. 1 to 10 millimicron. 1 millimicron means 10 is to power minus 6 meter. 1 millimicron means 10 is to power minus 6 meter. Okay, if we compare the eukaryotic cells, then these are 5 to 100 millimicron. These are the size of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. If we compare on the basis of the nuclear region, then we discussed that they have undefined nucleus. They have undefined nucleus. Why? Because they have lack of nuclear membrane. Because of the absence of the nuclear membrane, their nucleus is undefined. Okay, and as we discussed, such nucleus, that this type of nucleus is called nucleoid. So they have nucleoid type nuclear region. They have nucleoid type nuclear region. Got it? If we consider the eukaryotic cells, then we can say that they have defined nucleus. They have defined nucleus, or they have defined nuclear region, and they have presence of nuclear membrane. They have presence of nuclear membrane. Got it? If we consider the number of chromosomes, then they have single chromosome, and some of them they do not have defined chromosome also. They have just nucleic acids. So they have single chromosome, or in some of them do not have cleared chromosomes, defined chromosomes. But in the eukaryotic cells, they have more than one. They have more than one chromosomes. Okay, now next one is membrane bound cell organelles. So they have lack of membrane bound cell organelles. They do not have membrane bound cell organelle. Which one? Eukaryotic cells. While the prokaryotic cells, they have membrane bound cell organelle. They have membrane bound. Membrane bound, we can also say that defined, because there is a certain boundaries. So we can say that because of the presence of the membrane, they have certain specific boundaries. So we can say that defined cell organelles. Okay, so that is a table of comparison between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. One thing let me clear you, it is very important question for our exam. Whenever the questions of this chapter are considered, then this is the one of the most important question. Compare between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Okay. Now after that our next topic is cytoplasm. Our next topic is cytoplasm. What is cytoplasm? We already discussed that the material, the substance which is present between the nucleus and cell membrane is called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm, we can say that the substance or material, the substance present between sorry, cell membrane and nucleus. That substance which is present between the cell membrane, suppose that is cell membrane and that is nucleus. This material, this ground material, that is known as cytoplasm. Got it? Understand? One thing let me clear you. In the previous class we discussed about the protoplasm. Protoplasm is combined by these two. If I consider the nucleus and cytoplasm collectively, then it is called protoplasm. And if I am considering the material after the removal of the nucleus, then that is called cytoplasm. Got it? Understand? If we consider its composition, then it has two parts. One is, particularly, that means first is fluid, which is composed by water, minerals, salts, organic compounds, organic substances, etc. These make the fluid content of cytoplasm. And the second thing is the suspended particular structures, which are called cell organelles. The particular specific structures, or we can say that living structures. I am using living word here because they perform particular function of the cells. That's why we can say that the living structures that are called cell organelles. Got it? Now one thing that we already discussed, that the cytoplasm of the eukaryotic cells is well defined, and that means they have definite composition of the fluid and they have well organized cell organelles, while in prokaryotic cells they have poorly organized cytoplasm. That means they have lack of membrane bound cell organelles. Okay, here if we considering the importance of the cell organelle, that means defined cell organelle, if we consider the importance of defined cell organelle, then we consider one example, that is virus. This is a topic which is present in our chapter. I am discussing here about it. For the virus, one thing let me clear you, and you should know that it is the linkage between living and non-living. It is a linkage or link between living and non-living. That means Why it is considering the linkage? Because it shows properties of both livings and non-livings. The virus shows properties of both living and non-living. That's why it is called linkage between living and non-living. And this is one more important question which can ask in exam, that name the organism which is considered as the linkage between the living and non-living. Why we are saying linkage? Because in the in the life, it two stages, that is outside the cell, outside the other living organism, cell of other living organism, it behave like a dead particle. While when it enter the host, or particularly the cell of other organism, then it start to behave like a living material. That's why it is considered as linkage between living and non-living. Now the questions comes in our mind, why it is showing like this? Because the virus do not have any kind of self machinery to reproduce and perform the cellular functions, and it is because the virus do not have any kind of membrane bound cell organelle. So when it is outside of the living organism's body, then it behave like a dead particle. But when it enters in the body of other living organism, then it control the cell organelle of that cell, and start, and we can say that it use the cellular machinery. It use the cellular machinery of this cell and multiply, or we can say that multiply itself, or we can say that reproduce. And you know that reproduction is the characteristic of living organism. Got it? So it's showing the both the characters of the dead and non-living or living. That's why it is considered as linkage between living and non-living organisms. Okay. Now after that, the next topic is cell organelle. We already discussed. Let me remind it. What is cell organelle? Cell. Next topic is cell organelle. Cell organelles. If we consider the definition, then we can say that membrane bound very fine structures, of the cell which perform its activities. Membrane bound very fine structures which perform the activities of the cell and make it alive are called cell organelle. Membrane bound structures, very fine structures which perform all the activities of cell, like the respiration, the energy requirement, the protein synthesis, fat synthesis. Okay, so all the activities of cell, they performing all the activities of cell, so that the cell becomes alive, cell remain alive, are called cell organelle. Or if we consider the second definition, then we can say that certain certain specific components of a cell. Certain specific components of a cell which perform particular functions of a cell. Particular functions of a cell are called cell organelle. Got it? There are lots of cell organelle. If we consider the examples that we will discuss in the upcoming classes, first is endoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Second we will discuss, that is Golgi complex. Golgi complex or Golgi body or Golgi apparatus or dictyosome, ideosome, that are the names of this. Third, that we discuss lysosome, and then mitochondria. These are the common cell organelles of the plant and animal cells. Other than it, in plants we will discuss about the plastids, okay, and in animals the one more some of the other structures, that like the centrosomes, but that structure is not in our syllabus. So these are the cell organelles we will discuss in next classes. Okay, thank you.